So thank you everyone for joining the quarterly content webinar. My name is Tamar Gano and I'm the Content Product Manager. But today, Content Operations is giving the floor to the dedicated members of the Community Zone Management Group. Presenting today are Elizabeth York from Rutgers University and Galen Jones from the Open University, who co-chair the working group. And also presenting would be Kevin Balster from the University of California and Steve Shadle from the University of Washington and Craig Rosenbeck. Please use the Q&A section for questions. You may begin. Share the screen. Okay.
Hi, so yeah, thank you everyone for attending, and hello to everyone watching on catch up. Today we're going to be looking at mastering metadata with the Community Zone Management Group, navigating the Community Zone. So if we move on to the next slide, I will give you a quick introduction to the group and our work. So we've been established now for almost a decade. And we're a subgroup of the ALMA product working group. Our membership has grown this year to almost 20 community members and 5 ex-Libris members. And we're grateful for the ability to collaborate with ex-Libris on developing the community zone. We also, as a group, have representation on the ALMA product working group. So that's Stacey Trail from the University of Minnesota. The content working group and the ALMA Authorities focus group, where I'm the liaison member, and also the linked data interest group with Joanne Rowan from University of Auckland, who communicate between the groups and share information accordingly. Thank you. So this is a list of the 20 community members. So we have a global pool of institutions with a number of small and large institutions, and there's a number of consortia represented here too. So it's a diverse pool that's representative of a range of organizations and ex-Libris customers. So a quick overview of our remit. We work with ex-Libris on policies and procedures relating to community zone bibliographic metadata maintenance. We advise on community zone training needs and the development and delivery of educational resources encompassing existing and evolving functionality. We advocate for adherence to international metadata standards by content providers, industry bodies, and the wider community, and also seek to address misunderstandings or disagreements regarding detrimental editing or the addition of incorrect metadata to the community zone. We seek to engage with the library community via discussion lists and conferences, and communicate the work we've completed. And also we consult with the community on proposed community zone projects. We advise ex-Libris and other community groups on matters concerning bibliographic records and functionality in the community zone, and suggest specific improvements and adjustments to ex-Libris on a formal, regular basis, and work closely with ex-Libris on planning improvements and changes to the community zone. In 2024, reflecting our remit, we've input into the redesign of the community zone update tasks list. We've established indicators for generative AI enrichment to our metadata. We've replaced general material designators, the 245 subfield H subfield, with the relevant 33X fields. We've made corrections to the electronic collection merge routine, and we've made a number of recommendations on authority control. There's now a clearer indication when you're editing a community zone record, and we've put forward ideas on open access content. We're involved with discussions relating to the preloading of CONSA records that have no portfolios and the pre-release of e-collection records. Groups also advocated for DEI in the community zone, and during the year Homosaurus was added. On a similar note, we're currently reviewing the Arts and Architecture Thesaurus, which is going to be loaded soonish. So thank you. In addition to our regular agenda items, we also invite guest speakers. And during 2024, we invited Noam Fass, who heads the provider relations team. And we use that opportunity to learn more about how community zone provider metadata is loaded. So looking at how the metadata in the community zone matches the content that is available from the providers, and ensuring that providers supply high quality metadata with effective linking. Also during the year, we had Itai Veltzman attend to discuss linked data and the conversion to linked data in the Alma community zone. Itai emphasized that Ex Libris's approach to implementing linked data will develop and deploy gradually, and that marked data and linked data will coexist in Ex Libris systems for the forthcoming. They work to accommodate BibFrame as one of the more mature library linked data models has progressed well, and he spoke to us about the form-based data entry and the conversion to BibFrame from Mark 21. Thank you, and I pass you on to Elizabeth.
Thanks, Galen. So I am going to be talking about best practices while editing CZ records. Next slide. So we'll start by talking about some CZ record editing basics. So our CZ bib records display a people icon. We can see in this example, our first record on the list, the number 1, has a people icon next to it. And this lets us know this is our CZ record. The records that are not CZ records do not display a people icon. And it's important to note this because if you are editing a CZ record, even if it is in your IZ, you are editing the CZ record itself, and your edits will be transmitted to all libraries using the CZ record. So you want to make sure the edits you make to CZ records are correct and beneficial for the entire community using Alma, including libraries that have access to a resource on a different platform. Next slide, please. We also have a CZ editing indication in the metadata editor. This is a new feature introduced in May 2024 that we advocated for in the CZMG. And you can see in this example, a purple tag, community record, is at the top of the metadata editor, and it reminds you that you are editing a CZ record. Also, after you select a save option, a confirmation required box prompts you to confirm that you want to save your changes to the CZ record. So let's pretend I just edited this record and I clicked save. Let's look at the next slide. I can now see my confirmation required box, and it tells me you are about to update a community record. Do you want to save the changes? And I can click yes if I know I want to transmit these changes to everybody in the CZ, or if I realize, no, I thought this was my local record, I don't want to save this to the CZ, I can click no. Now, we in the CZMG have suggested that we could make this message even clearer to community members with the wording, you are about to update a community record. Your edits will affect all Alma customers. Do you still want to save these changes? And Ex Libris has approved this suggested wording and says they plan to implement it in the future in this box. Next slide. So now that we know how to identify our CZ records, what are some CZ metadata changes you can make yourself to improve the quality of the CZ? Well, you can edit most metadata fields in CZ records, and there are just a few exceptions. Some fields just cannot be added to CZ records because they're for institution or platform-specific information, such as 856 for URLs and many 9xx fields, which are reserved in the MARC standard for local information. You just simply can't save these fields to CZ records. Also, the 022 field ISSN cannot be added, edited, or removed because it is so important for link resolver linking. So instead, you have to request edits to this field from Ex Libris. Similarly, the 020 field for ISBN and the 776, which is additional physical form entry and for e-resources typically contains the print ISBN or ISSN, these fields can be added or edited, but not removed, again, because they're so important for linking, and you can request these edits from Ex Libris instead. But aside from these reserved fields, you can make lots of changes to the fields in CZ records, and you always want to make sure you're making changes useful for all ALMA users, regardless of institution or the resource provider. So some examples of good edits to make yourself include adding or correcting subtitles, author, editor, and other contributor information, publication information like the location, publisher, or year, edition information, tables of contents, standard subject headings, correct identifiers, such as ISBNs, ISBD punctuation, and subfield indicators. You do, however, want to note that the changes you make could be overwritten by edits from other ALMA libraries or by provider record loads, which are part of the CZ updates managed by Ex Libris. Ex Libris is enriching the CZ with bib data from many different providers such as eBook Central, Project News, Taylor and Francis, Bloomsbury, just a lot of different providers' data is coming into the CZ. And we're going to tell you more about merge rules for CZ updates later in this presentation. Next slide. So what are some CZ metadata updates you should not make? Well, you don't want to change a CZ record from one work into a different work, or from one edition into a different edition, because this record doesn't just live in your IZ. The changes you make are transmitted to all ALMA libraries. So if you change the work or the edition, you're changing it for all the other ALMA libraries using that record, and that change probably isn't correct for them. You also don't want to remove valid identifiers, as they may be used for link resolver linking and as match points in record load and analyses. And ALMA currently keeps you from removing the 020 and 022s and 776s yourself. So this is not as much of a problem as maybe it used to be, but still be careful even if you request these removals from Ex Libris. You also don't want to add platform or institution-specific information to a bib record because that information will not be correct for other institutions or other institutions that have access to the resource on a different platform. You also don't want to translate the metadata in a record into a language other than the language of the material being cataloged. This is a bit of an obscure point that may be different from other bibliographic systems you've interacted with, but because the CZ is a global product and we share our CZ records with institutions around the world, we need a sort of baseline rule for what language should a CZ record be in. And the best rule Ex Libris has been able to devise is that the CZ record should be in the language of the material being cataloged. And this isn't always followed perfectly, but we should do our best to respect this to try to bring some order to the CZ. So next slide, please. So what are some CZ metadata changes that you might want to see made that you should request from Ex Libris? You can file a support ticket to request 022 ISSN additions and corrections, 020 ISBN, and 776 print ISBN or ISSN removals. With these, you want to make sure you're absolutely, you want to double check and make sure this is the correct thing to do before you request it. You can also request merging of duplicate CZ records for the same resource. I see this sometimes. There'll be two different CZ records for the exact same book. Maybe one provider sent one ISBN and another provider sent a slightly different ISBN, but they really are the same book. We can ask Ex Libris to merge those. We also can ask Ex Libris to make a correction if a CZ record mixes metadata for two different resources. This can happen sometimes if a provider gave a totally incorrect identifier for a resource. Maybe they gave an incorrect ISBN, and two book records mistakenly merged automatically. We can ask Ex Libris to separate out that into two separate bib records. And we also want Ex Libris to put the right portfolios on each of those two bibs. So that's why it's so important to get the help from Ex Libris instead of trying to separate it yourself. You also can request correction of a metadata error that occurs across a large number of records that will require batch action because Ex Libris has bigger tools to use behind the scenes than we have, and can also work with the provider if necessary to request corrections. Next slide, please. So I told you not to record institution-specific information in CZ records, but there is an alternate way you can record this information. You are not left without a way to record your institution-specific data. Next slide, please. And that is local extensions. Local extensions are special fields you add to a CZ record that are only visible to users at your institution. So some example use cases include a database offers multiple modules and you want to list just the ones your institution purchased. Maybe you want to add local subject headings, or you would like to add a local call number. Or perhaps you would like to add a note explaining how this resource is especially relevant for your community. Maybe one of your professors wrote this book, or maybe this was purchased with a special grant you received. So these are all possible cases where you want to record institution-specific information using local extensions. Next slide. So which fields can be added as local extensions? Well, there's a Knowledge Center documentation article, and I know we're going to share the slides, so you'll have the link, but I've copied the chart here as well. You can see that they're mainly the fields reserved for local data in the MARC standard 9X and 9XX primarily. Next slide. How do you add local extensions? Well, for individual records, it's pretty easy. You open a CZ record in the metadata editor, and in the editing actions menu, select Add Local Extension. The new field will appear with an institution icon next to it. You can see this in my example. It looks like a gray building with columns, and you're going to add your field and save and release the record. You can also add normalization processes. You can use normalization processes to maintain your local extensions, and you could add local extensions in the repository, update inventory, and new order import profiles. So you also have tools to maintain your local extensions in a batch. Next slide. Okay, so here we are looking at our local extensions in the IZ. And in my example, we purchased several modules on Audio Digest platform, and we want to show using local extensions which modules we purchased. And our module purchase list is probably different from other libraries. So we activated the Audio Digest database collection in the CZ, and in the CZ MARC record, we added our 590 fields as local extensions listing the modules we purchased. And now we can see our local extensions in Almo, and they're also visible in our institution's Primo. So this is our nice view in Alma, and can we see the next slide? And now here we are in Primo, and we see the local extensions we added are visible to our end users in Primo, just like our normal MARC 590 field would have been. They're in the local note, and it's just all seamless for the end user. Now let's look at our CZ view though. If we check the CZ record, we can see there are no local extensions, and that's good because that means other libraries using this record in the CZ don't see our local extensions at all. The record is untouched and they don't see our local data. Our local extensions are only visible in our IZ and in our Primo. Next slide. There also are cases where you might not want to use the bib record, but instead you might want to use the electronic collection and portfolio fields for institution and platform specific information. For example, you might want to store the number of simultaneous users allowed by a platform in the public access model field of the electronic collection. Or if your number of users varies for the different books on a platform, you might store this information at the portfolio level. You can also enter special authentication instructions using the authentication note field, either at the collection or portfolio level. So you want to think about whether your information is really suited for the bibliographic level using local extensions, or whether you should use the fields available to you in the electronic collection and portfolio fields. All right, I think I am now going to hand this over to Galen to get us started talking about merge rules.
Oh yeah, so the rules for monographs have changed over the years, and we'll be updating documentation to reflect the current status. Records for monographs in the community zone are enriched by Ex Libris using MARC records supplied by multiple providers. So you will often get metadata from a variety of providers merged into a single record in the community zone. Those records will be provider neutral, and as Elizabeth has said, if you find duplicates, report them for merging. Next slide. So for monographs, each monograph provider has its own tailored merge routine, but for high quality incoming records, fields that are generally overlaid include the leader, the date and time of the last edit, some of the fixed fields, the Library of Congress control number, cataloging source, authentication codes, the classification fields, and name access points. Also a range of the title fields and edition statement, imprint, series statement fields, various note fields and subject headings, in addition to the 7XX name access points and 730 added entry. So the originating system IDs of the incoming records, the field 035, are only added. So you will see a trail of 035s as the merges that have historically taken place. Incoming records that do not meet all requirements or have some quality issues can be set up to still override fields if they're replacing a very brief record, but will only add fields and not overlay if the incoming record matches to an already enriched record. So to determine if a record is already enriched, currently the system looks at both the presence of 3 XX fields and the leader is 18 is not set to hyphen. Fields that are not overlaid or added during enrichment include the ISBNs in the 020 and 776 fields, and also the 906 fields. These are added and updated via the weekly CKB update. For all records, including serials, the 533 field, 59X, 69X, 655 fields with the value electronic types, and 856 and 9XX fields. 920 and 999 may still be present in records and accepted, an exception, sorry. Depending on the source, if fields such as 506, 538, 540, 710, 797, etc. have provider-specific information, they will not be overlaid or added during enrichment. And depending on the source, if other fields have data quality issues, for example, incorrect information, incorrectly formatted data, or incomplete fields, they will not be added either. So Ex Libris analysts look at a variety of metadata when they're determining the quality of the provider sourced metadata. So they will look at the compliance of with international bibliographic standards, including resource description and access, or Anglo-American cataloging rules version 2. They will look whether the 65X fields link to Library of Congress subject authorities or other authorized authorities, and also similarly with the 1XX and 7XX fields. They will look at whether the encoding and the diacritics are correctly transmitted, and will use MARC validation tools to assess the quality. Further considerations will be given to their compliance with fields recommended per the CKC guidelines, and there will be a comparison of records and data between the new provider and established community zone record mark providers. So that here we are looking at, sorry, next slide. Yeah, when identifying the source of providers and the frequency of their updates, you'll see that Ex Libris on their Knowledge Center will provide a full definition of the system IDs that you can see. So if we move forward to the next slide, you'll see in ALMA, in the right-hand pane, there's the originating system code present, and you can look up to see which specific provider has updated that record and the likely frequency of updates by that provider. So I'll hand you over now to my colleagues Kevin and Steve.
Hello. So I'm going to talk briefly about everybody's favorite topic, serials. So I put in the chat a couple of the links that we're referencing here in the slides. So I'm just going to discuss quickly the merge routine for serials. So there is a knowledge article kind of that gives a good overview of the process, and it's the community zone serial record enhancement process. And sort of like the takeaways of this is the serial enrichment process occurs weekly. And I think it's not necessarily that every record gets updated weekly. It's that if the source record that would be used for enrichment has been updated sometime during that week, that it will be then used to enrich an existing community zone record. So the primary source of those records is the CONSER database, but if there is no appropriate CONSER record available, the enrichment can include some brief records that are supplemented by the German Union Catalog of Serials. And so when the system is looking for appropriate CONSER records, the sort of best case is that if there's an appropriate electronic version record, that will be used to enrich the community zone record. If there is not an electronic version record, then a print record can be used with a little bit of data conversion. And so that's that second link down below. That goes sort of into the process of what is done to the print version records. Kind of the main takeaway with that is that there are some changes made to remove print-specific information, so like your 3x fields and 300 field, giving dimensions in that. And then also the OCLC number and ISSN in the print record will be moved to a 776. So there'll be sort of a customized 776 field pointing to the print version record. And so the main point here is that when the system is looking for electronic version CONSER records to use, it's really looking for a record with an appropriate ISSN. So that is sort of like the key data element that it's looking for in order to match with the record in the community zone. So if there's not a match there, that's when it starts going to the print version record, or just doing like some of the smaller supplemental updates. So next slide, please. So now that we've kind of looked at how the records are identified to be used for enrichment, when those records are brought in, most of those fields, as we've seen in other enrichment processes, most of the existing fields in the community zone record are overlaid with a few notable exceptions. So as we've seen before with the 022 field, linking entry fields, some 9XX fields, so including like the 906, and I think like the 920, and the existing one, those will remain. and the 655, anything containing the word electronic. So that's sort of across the board. Those fields are not brought in that community zone records. So the main thing here again is for ISSN is, and those cannot be manually added. And so the kind of the point stands here too, where if there's an existing ISSN in the community zone record if that was brought in from the CONSER record, that would involve, removing the existing 022. And since those are sort of protected, that would require not bringing in a new 022 and sort of the linking entry fields too. So next slide, please. So the main takeaway here, so as always, the importance of the ISSN field, and any of like the linking entry fields can be, they cannot be overwritten by an enhancement process, but they can be manually changed. And I think especially for the 776, that can be created through the print record conversion process. And really the intent of this is to protect ISSNs. So as Elizabeth had mentioned before, the ISSNs, these identifiers are really the key identifier for identifying titles, for matching titles, for merging, and for the link resolvers themselves in order to accurately link out to things. So by protecting those, it helps ensure that we're not making edits to records to sort of inadvertently change a title into something else and then causing confusion. So it's really to keep those titles the same as they should be. Next slide, please. Of course, this is sort of a complex system with all of the merge routines and identifying records for enhancement and all of that. So I think in the course of building this presentation, we did come across just a few minor sort of unexpected cases of unexpected behavior. So one case, I think there were a few records with the 506 note, so that's was restrictions on access. I think there were some cases where that field was being protected in the community zone record, but then it was also being brought in with CONSER records, so it was resulting in some duplicative 506 fields. And then there were some cases with linking entry fields where there was parallel text in, so you had multiple 7x fields, one with sort of in an original script. And since 7.7, those linking entry fields are not imported, those are not added to the community zone records, but the parallel fields are technically in 880 fields. So we had some of those being brought in. And then we had a couple cases where we had identified where there was what seemed to be an appropriate electronic version CONSER record, but it was not overlaying sort of on the print. And in all of those cases, we had sort of reported those to Ex Libris, and all of them were either identified and fixed, or they're sort of in the process of fixing those. So all this really is to say that if you do find sort of unexpected things in community zone records that seem like there is some quirky behavior with the enrichment process, do report those to Ex Libris via Support Center so they can identify those and get them all fixed. Next one. And so just and I wanted to leave you with some upcoming community zone enhancement for serials. And Galen had mentioned this early on in the slide, is that sort of in the works right now, that Ex Libris is planning on adding the full set of CONSER electronic version records to the community zone. And I think it should be relatively soon. And so these will be records, they will sort of the entire CONSER database for electronic version records, they can add them even if there's not existing inventory in the community zone. And we're hoping that this will really help with quickly getting full records for new titles. So if you have the record in the community zone before there's a portfolio available for it, rather than sort of having an initial brief record, that then gets overlaid minus some linking entry fields and things like that. You can sort of have right out of the gate a full, a full console level record. And then they're also considering, I think, in the normal enrichment process, whether to include 780, 785 fields from console records, just to kind of help with title changes in earlier and later titles like that. And next slide. And I will turn it over to Craig.
Evan, appreciate it. We're going to continue with the exciting topic of merge rules, and this one's going to be with databases. So here's some fields that we need to be cognitive and make sure that you're aware when there are updates. The marked fields will be overwritten. So the 245, the collection public name, the 520 collection description, the collection and content type, 300, that is a repetitive field, and it will appear separately for collection type and for content type. And don't forget the target ID, which is a collection ID, describes the record, and target ID is the SFX term. This is so here is a warning. When adding or editing the collection description record, these fields mentioned above are overwritten when there is a Ex Libris update. So please make note again of these when you are working with merge rules and databases. And those that get excited about release notes, there is a knowledge base describing this fix. However, and it's at the bottom. However, we're hoping that there's going to be a master document that better describes this rather than at the on a knowledge base article at the bottom of a page. So please look forward to that. And I will be turning this over to Elizabeth.
Thanks, Craig. So I am going to be talking about AI-generated metadata in the CZ, and I'm just giving you a quick overview. We did a longer presentation about this, I and David Hanegbi from Ex Libris back in March, and so I'm going to pop some links for that in the chat, and also will share those with you. But I refer you to that one for a longer overview, but this will be just a quick look and a preview of what's coming next. So next slide. Okay, so let's talk about the need for the AI-enriched metadata in CZ records. What was Ex Libris trying to accomplish? Well, we know some providers are unable to share detailed bibliographic metadata with Ex Libris, and some CZ records have minimal metadata. However, robust metadata is needed in Primo so users can discover resources, evaluate their usefulness, and link to related resources. Standardized metadata, such as Library of Congress subject headings, Library of Congress classification, and Dewey Decimal classification can be used by libraries for collection analyses in ALMA and ALMA Analytics, but we need those data points to be there in order to perform analyses using them. So with the public availability of generative AI, we have the opportunity to apply a new tool to our field to help fill in the missing metadata. Next slide. So we'll talk a little bit about the development and testing process Ex Libris did to develop the AI metadata generator. From July 2023 to February 2024, there was a testing and a lot of manual review happening by Ex Libris and librarians such as myself. And the initial development consisted solely of metadata for ebooks on ProQuest eBook Central because Ex Libris was able to obtain the rights to use the full text of those books. And based on testing and analysis, Ex Libris, in consultation with librarians, made the following scoping decisions. We decided that the fields to focus on should be language 041, summary 520, and LC subject headings 650 because they required generative AI to produce. They couldn't just be scraped using OCR or a more familiar technology. It was a way to really test the possibilities of generative AI. Also, their presence would improve the quality of a CZ record, would be making real improvements, and preliminary testing of the AI metadata generator showed these fields could be generated by AI successfully. We also tested 050 for Library of Congress classification and 082 for Dewey Decimal classification. And at that time, we weren't quite as satisfied with the results, so we didn't use those fields in the initial release. We also had to test to see how much of the book AI should read before generating this data. And for scholarly nonfiction, I was surprised to see that AI really did better reading the first 15 pages of the book rather than the full book, probably because the table of contents and introduction provided a really succinct overview of the whole book. We also had to make some genre decisions. We decided to focus on nonfiction because the summaries and subject headings AI generated for nonfiction tended to be better, and fiction was a bigger challenge for AI as it struggled to differentiate between subject, what a book is about, and genre, what a book is. So also the CZMG got involved in this process by working with Ex Libris to determine how AI generated metadata would be marked in CZ records. And we decided on 588, the source of description note, and the text we chose was part of the metadata in this record was created by AI based on the text of the resource. We also agreed on adding an 035 system control number field beginning with a prefix EXL-AI. And this is an indexed field. At the time we made this decision, 588 wasn't indexed. So it was very important to have an indexed field so people could easily query in ALMA and find all the records with AI generated data. And so you can search for other system number in ALMA for this keyword, in parentheses, EXL-AI, to see records with AI generated data. We also agreed a 7 subfield generated by AI should be in each 520 and 650 field with AI generated data. Next slide, please. So just taking a step back, what's the overall process for AI enrichment of CZ records that Ex Libris arrived at? We start with the PDF full text, and AI reads the first 15 pages of a scholarly nonfiction book. Then the AI metadata generator determines language and maps it to MARC 041, asks 5 questions about the book and rephrases the answers into a short summary, MARC 520, and chooses 5 subjects, non-standardized, for the book. It then maps those subjects to Library of Congress subject headings and puts that chosen heading into the MARC 650. And the end result is an enriched CZ record, improved overall quality. Next slide. So here's an example of a CZ record enriched with AI-generated metadata. And we can see the 035 field with the prefix EXL-AI, marking this as an AI-enhanced record. We can see the 588 telling us part of the metadata in this record was created by AI based on the text of the resource. We look down at the 520 and see the summary AI generated and the 7 subfields telling us generated by AI. Similarly, we look at the 650 fields and see Library of Congress subject headings, also with the 7 subfields saying generated by AI. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to tell you about the timeline, about the first release, current state, and future plans. In February 2024, Ex Libris added AI-generated metadata fields to 200 CZ records. These were the 041 for language, 520 for summary, and 650 for Library of Congress subject headings. Then in March 2024, there was an Ex Libris webinar, the one where I participated, as did David Hanegbi from Ex Libris, in which we introduced the AI-generated metadata and described the process in greater detail. I put some links in the chat so you can link to that. I suggest looking at that if you have greater interest in this. Then from March through August 2024, a larger group of librarians assisted in reviewing AI-generated metadata as Ex Libris worked on developing ways to speed up metadata generation and checking, with the hope being that we won't have to do as much manual checking in the future. Then as of right now, September 2024, there is more AI-generated data released into the CZ. As of this Monday, September 16th, I ran a search for that prefix EXL-AI and found 502 AI-enriched records in the CZ. Also, Ex Libris is going to be implementing an automated check for subject headings that is part of the AI metadata generator process. After AI generates the 5 subjects and maps them to LCSH, it takes those 5 LCSH subjects and compares them back to the summary it generated for the book. Then it chooses the top 2 LCSH that are the closest match to the summary and adds those two to the record. So that's a way AI can check its own work and make sure only the best LCSH are added to the record. So Ex Libris has future plans for this, of course, and some of these include greatly increasing the number of records enhanced with AI-generated metadata. So we need to keep our eyes out as we hear more about this and learn about what's being added going forward. Ex Libris also is hoping to add tables of contents, 505 fields to CZ records. Now, this doesn't require generative AI. We don't want generative AI to make up a table of contents. This is using more conventional technology, such as OCR, just to read the book and copy the table of contents into the CZ record. But this is a field many people are very interested in, table of contents, so this should also help improve the quality of CZ records. Also, Ex Libris is hoping to develop a way to use AI to generate that 050 for Library of Congress classification and 082 for Dewey Decimal classification. This was more difficult when we did our initial testing, but these would be good fields to include because they would allow libraries to do some subject-based analysis. So we hope this will be developed in the future. So thank you very much to everyone. Thank you from the CZMG. And now I think we have a little bit of time for questions that may have come in through the Q&A.
Yes, we have a question in the Q&A. If you add the field by keying in the number, will that transform into a local extension when you save the record?
I think you really need to select local extension first, because if you just key it in, say, let's see, I think you'd be better off selecting local extensions first to be absolutely certain you don't enter the data and save it as a regular field into the CZ record by mistake. So that's what I would recommend. If your experience is different, though, I think that would be interesting to hear that if you've been somehow entering local extensions without selecting local extension first. But I would select local extension from the dropdown first.
Thank you. Is there a mechanism for requesting the removal of institution-specific data from CZ records? Not a specific mechanism, just opening support cases, if you come across these.
And if it's really bothering you, you could remove it yourself. But if it's a systemic issue, you might want to let Ex Libris know. I've also been known to email libraries and be like, hey, I found your data in a CZ record. You might not know this, but you're not actually supposed to be doing this. So if you feel really inclined to be helpful, you can even let the library know. But then you have to hope you've emailed the right person. So, yeah.
Great. Another question, can the AI enrichment be used on institution records as well? For the AI enrichment process to happen, we do need the full text of the record. And so it depends. If an institution does have copyright for records, then we can work with that. Please just write me an email directly, and we'll see if we can get this going and pick it up. I'll add my email in the chat. Okay. Are there plans to add medical subject headings and mesh with AI to CZ records in the future? We don't have anything concrete with the medical subject headings at the moment, but we are thinking about expanding and working more with the AI to improve records on different with different subject headings, but nothing concrete at the moment. Next question, is the AI generated metadata only for English language works? No, it's not. It's working also for non-English languages, and it's working well. as far as we got with a little over 500 records, but we see it's pretty good. The slides will be posted under the webinars section in the content part of the Knowledge Center, and I will circulate that in the mailing list after the webinar is over. Great, and let's see, we also have some questions in the chat. Will these 650 subject headings be controlled with the authority control jobs that were announced for CZ records? Yes, they will. And is the CZMG open to accepting new members? So, Galen and Elizabeth?
We do periodically seek new members. We're currently, I think, at capacity. But I think maybe if you want, would you be happy to receive an email from them tomorrow and we can review?
Absolutely, yeah. So please email Galen or Elizabeth. You can find their contacts either in the Igloo website or the Illuna website for the working groups. In an NZine context, you have to use the Add Local Extension option to add one. Just keying in the field number will save as a regular field. I would assume that would be the same for CZ local extensions.
That sounds like a good answer. Thank you for sharing that. So it does sound like it's important to select that local extension option before keying in your field.
I think a number of the 9XX fields will automatically not save, so that you wouldn't be able to get them without setting them up as an extension.
Okay. Another question. Who is doing the merge rule activities? Can this be done by all ALMA users with certain cataloging rules? If so, what merge rule would be used?
So I believe the merge rules we've covered today are centrally managed by Ex Libris content services. Yeah.
Yes. Not sure, can this be done by all ALMA users? Since it's not specifically assigned to cataloging rules, but it's being done centrally by Ex Libris. So another question, is there a function to hide certain fields of CZ records in institution zone, the opposite of a local extension? Not sure I understood that.
I think from your Primo, when you customize what's visible in your Primo, you could make some just general rules about I want to display these fields to my end users versus I don't want to display these other fields. Now, whether you could, I'm not sure you can go as granular as to say, I wanted to just say, I don't know, say I don't like 780 fields. I want to display these if it's in my local record, but I don't want to display it in the C if it's from a CZ record. I don't know that you can make this local versus CZ distinction. However, you could just make this distinction of, I don't want to display any 780 fields. I don't like them. So I think at minimum, you could choose to hide a field by number globally from your view in Primo. Whether you can differentiate between CZ hiding CZ but not hiding local, I don't know.
Okay, and here's a tip. When we assess the mesh headings, we could find UMLS as a great cross-thesaurus platform to help create high-quality headings from varied terms and synonyms. Thank you for that. We'll look into it. Here's another question. Can I add 035 OCLC number into a CZ record?
Can I pop in on that one? One of the problems that we had with OCLC record numbers in CZ records in the past was that occasionally Ex Libris uses a print version record if there is not, that is then modified to make it look like an electronic version record. If there is no electronic version record available in the consor file. The problem, we discovered this a few years ago, that then what happened was, at that point, the OCLC records were not, that was not one of the modifications that was made to a print version record. So we discovered that libraries would have an IZ record that actually represented the print version, and then a CZ record that represented the online version of a serial, both with the same OCLC number. And libraries were complaining because they had what they thought were duplicate records with exactly duplicate OCLC records, with one representing the print and one representing the online. So we sort of had a blanket policy at that point in terms of print version records being used, print version serial records being used in the community zone to delete the OCLC number so that we wouldn't have those duplicates that were reported by many libraries. Technically, you could add an 035 into the CZ record, but unless you're using it for, I'm not sure what your use would be of it. Let's put it that way. I would really need to have a use case to justify it.
Okay. Have another question. If I use conversion tools image to text and ask ChatGPT to format the text according to the rules of 505 field, does it mean generated by AI? Well, I would argue it does. I think that you do create something that wasn't before, not as a copy paste. Really, it's so it is. It sounds like generative AI to me, but I don't know if Elizabeth, you have a different take on that.
I mean, I suppose at this point it's sort of an intellectual question, unless you're planning on adding your 505s to CZ records, which, I mean, we hadn't thought about. I don't think we even thought about customers generating their own AI data and adding to CZ records. That's an interesting thing. I think you'd want to review that 505 very carefully to make sure AI really did what it was supposed to do and didn't garble it somehow. Yeah, I think we're in what you did use AI to interact with it. So I would be a little, I would be inclined to say at this point, it seems like we're acting from a place of caution where we are noting all the interactions AI has with data. So I'd be inclined to say, yeah, say that it was generated by the AI in the sense that AI interacted with it, not in the sense that AI made it up out of whole cloth. I think this is an area though, where as AI matures, we're going to see maybe have better insights into how we determine how we interact with AI and how we describe what that interaction was.
Yeah. Thanks. Another question, when a BIB record is updated, will our institutional level field 9, XX, etc. remain?
You want to make sure they're local extensions. Otherwise, you shouldn't be putting them in the CZ record. If they're local extensions, they'll stay in. So go ahead and make sure they're local extensions. And when the CZ record is updated, they will remain in place.
Great. And I think we have time for one more question. Can local extensions be added by a job to a number of local records?
You can use norm rules, and you can also use import profiles. So the tools you use are rather cataloging centric, but you can write a norm rule and apply it to a set of records. Or if you had an incoming set of records, maybe you're loading from a vendor, you could choose to apply your local extension to all of them. So those are the tools we have right now for applying local extensions in a batch.
Great. So I see we have a few more questions about AI. So I'm just putting in the chat the direct email address for for the AI mailbox at Exlibris, so feel free to just drop a line and ask. And I'd like to thank our panelists very much. It was really interesting, and I think it's very important. And I really appreciate your sharing your experience with the community and talking about everything in CZ. And well, not everything. There's a whole lot more about to talk about. We will circulate a survey at the end, so please answer and give us more ideas for future tips and tricks and webinars. Thank you very much.